Hey there, EB here on the Anything But Bland weekly update. It's Friday, wishing everybody a good Friday. So much has happened, obviously, since last week at warp speed on a number of fronts, whether it's all the federal job cuts, whether it's the potential new golden, beautiful tax plan, more tax breaks for the rich, um, and tariffs on the horizon, as well as the budget that's coming up on March 14th, the budget deadline. So let's just kind of ease into it. Today, we're going to be talking a lot about Ukraine because Zelensky is here from Ukraine to meet with President Trump and sign an agreement regarding the uh, minerals, precious minerals that are under the ground in Ukraine. They have one of the richest mineral deposits in the world for aluminum and a whole bunch of other cobalt and different things that go into making batteries and different things that we use in our various computers and car batteries and things of that nature. So let's talk about how we got to where we are. Um, Finally, Pence and former Vice President Mike Pence and Nikki Haley spoke up and said what Trump is saying about Ukraine, that they started the war and that Zelensky is a dictator, and that Putin is not, is simply false. And that if we're going to try to be an honest broker and broker a lasting peace deal between Russia and Ukraine, and essentially Russia and Europe, because their interests are intertwined, Ukraine and Europe's, we have to proceed with truth. And the truth is, Zelensky is not a dictator. The truth is that he was duly elected. He's operating under martial law because they're involved in a full blown war right now. And because we do know that the invasion happened because Putin invaded Ukraine in 2022. So it's been a 3-year war. Um, Sadly, the United States this week joined Russia, Iran, North Korea, and China in voted in their vote against Ukraine at the United Nations, the first time it's ever been done, that we've aligned ourselves with these four despot countries that are ruled by dictators, whether it's Iran, North Korea, and China, and Russia, of course. And the proclamation that we ruled against was that the war was started as a result of Russia's invading Ukraine. That is something that is really troubling. I think Ukraine is in this position because in 1994, they agreed to give up their nuclear weapons in return for the West protecting their borders. And that was a treaty. Obviously, the West is not protecting their borders since in 2014, Putin marched into Crimea. And then in 2022, he's marched further in and taken over some of the other land in the bordering part of Russia. So the worst thing I think that Ukraine ever did was give up their nuclear weapons, which puts them subservient to the interests of the United States and Europe. And it's interesting because this mineral deal, which I agree with, I think it would be a good idea for Ukraine to agree with it. But I do think that there needs to be some reciprocal promises for security for Ukraine, that there won't be any further encroachment by Russia into Ukraine, and that they have to give back some of the land that they have taken from Ukraine. Um, it's almost like The Sopranos. I'm going to get a piece of, in order to provide you security, you're going to pay me, uh, a piece of your weekly earnings. So, but I do agree. I do agree that we should get repaid some of the money that we have advanced towards Russia. I mean, to Ukraine. Now, the problem is that Trump is saying it's $500 billion. It's actually $140 billion, which is still a tremendous amount of money, but it's not 500 billion. And this uh, sharing of minerals will get us to $500 billion, is what Trump is saying. The problem is that of that 140 billion, a lot of that money, it wasn't just cash; it was some munitions and bombs and things of that nature, but it's what we invested in our country to build up munitions and different things for the war effort for Ukraine. So it's been a pretty good deal for the United States. I've talked about it in previous weeks that, we are not losing our men fighting Russia. Russia's been depleted. Their weapons are completely depleted. Um, in addition to that, their economy is in shambles. So that's one of the things. We also need to remember that North Korea is also fighting Ukraine, that Russia has enlisted the assistance of North Korea. Uh, and there's been, I think, 10,000 North Korean soldiers that are fighting. What are we going to do about that? Because that's a declaration of war that North Korea has placed on Ukraine. So that has not been discussed. You know, Trump has declared that Zelensky doesn't have to be at any of these peace meetings with uh, Russia. I think that that's a mistake. Again, if you're not at the table, you're on the table and you're getting carved up. Um, Trump has now seemed to reverse himself that Russia has attacked Ukraine after previously saying that Ukraine attacked Russia. Is this really brilliance in action? Why are we letting facts get in the way of a good story? If he's whipsawing one day saying it's Ukraine that attacked Russia and then the next day saying it's Russia that attacked Ukraine, how can anybody, Trump, trust his word? Trump has said that there's been 3 years of negotiation that have failed. I don't think he's paid particular attention that there hasn't been any negotiations because Europe and Ukraine don't trust Russia at the table. There hasn't been 3 years worth of negotiations. What there has been some exchange of prisoners, but there's been no negotiations at the table that this war is ending. But again, Trump said that there's been 3 years of negotiations, and so that's why he's going to give more things to Russia. Senator Wicker, who I believe is from Tennessee or Mississippi, I'm not sure, one of those two states, he said that it was an absolute rookie mistake by Trump and the Pentagon, chief of the Pentagon, Hagstaff, cabinet member, that they said Russia isn't going to have to give up any land. Why do you announce in advance before there's any negotiations that Russia is not going to have to give up any land? The next thing is Trump now has a new plan for immigrants that are high net worth individuals. And I don't know if I'm against it. I may be for it, but everything is for sale with him. Everything is transactional. And what he says is, for $5 million, you're not going to get a green card. If you pay us $5 million, you're going to get an enhanced gold card with additional benefits. I don't know what those benefits are. Maybe a faster path to citizenship, even though we don't have a path to citizenship for illegal immigrants. But I don't know where I stand, but I think I'm leaning on it. The problem is there are some students that don't have $5 million, people that have gone to either Oxford or different universities, whether it's in China or Japan, that have tremendous intellect and they could really help the brain trust in certain companies. If they don't have $5 million, that doesn't necessarily mean we're getting the best and the brightest. It means we're just getting the wealthiest. So now let's talk about a couple things, and we'll get back to, the German election, and we may touch back on Ukraine. So all of these cuts that are being done with U.S. aid and all the FAA that is being cut and different things, and if we fire all the federal workers, it's only 3% of the entire budget of our country. So if you cut the people at Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and the other VA mortgages, think of how much longer it's going to take for these people to get their mortgages, first-time home buyers. And what's going to end up happening is it's going to hurt the home building and the development companies because they're not going to be able to sell homes to first-time home buyers. It's going to take too long. At this point, we have, the unemployment's going to increase. So when the unemployment increases, these people are going to have to get unemployment insurance. And but they have rent and they have mortgages that have to be paid that are much greater than the amount of unemployment insurance they're going to get. Um, and can we at least start showing some humanity? Uh, I just never have seen somebody like Elon Musk, brag about, with a chainsaw that he's cutting government and cutting all these jobs. And, we had a cabinet meeting earlier this week, and for 55 minutes, the discussion was between Elon Musk, who's a non-elected cabinet official who was at that meeting, and President Trump. And it was 55 minutes before another person spoke, and that was JD Vance, who only spoke for 35 seconds. Some of these cabinet officials had planned speeches that they were going to make. And Musk stood up and said, look, we're going to make mistakes. We made a mistake with pulling the Ebola vaccines, but we got them right back up online. It turns out that they really haven't gotten them back up online fully yet. And that we must recognize that these individuals are people with families, people with children, people who love their job. Not everybody's a fat cat bureaucrat. We certainly have a bloated government. We certainly should have a situation where we do a lot of research and analysis in determining, what 10% should be cut in a department, and then do a report on that, and then send it to Congress. Again, let's not measure once and cut 3 times. Let's measure 3 times and cut once. There's no sense of urgency that you have to do it in 10 days when it may be better to do it over 60 days where it's more thoughtful. But let's remember that these are people who went to college, and some of their jobs are only available in the government, whether it's research or forestry, or highway work, highway design work. Let's remember that these are people too. Marjorie Taylor Greene said something earlier this week that absolutely shocked me. She said, federal workers don't deserve their jobs. I mean, she's a federal employee. She gets paid by the federal government to be a House member. Where would she get off saying that federal workers don't get their jobs? The next thing is, there was a sad story in Texas where an 11-year-old girl, she committed suicide at school because she was bullied at school. She was threatened by other students that she was going to be deported and that they were going to call ICE. It happened in Gainesville, Texas. I think we just need to lower the rhetoric, because there are, again, families involved here. There are young kids that are involved. And so I think we should just remember, let's have a heart. Let's have a little bit of grace. Let's remember that these people's lives are going to be upended, whether they're here illegally or not. They have children that are innocent. We also know that Governor Hochul of New York decided that she was not going to terminate Mayor Adams, Eric Adams' mayorship in New York City. One, because she said it would take too long because he would appeal and appeal and appeal. And by the time that got resolved, it would already be time for the new primaries, where he's probably going to be primaried by former Governor Andrew Cuomo. So what she said is she was going to set an oversight committee to watch his actions to make sure he's not doing the bidding of President Trump in return for him not being prosecuted. He said that he would not agree to that. And so we're going to see how that shakes out. We know that Donald Trump canceled the commuter tax in the middle of New York City. Hochul then went on TV and said, okay, where are you coming up with the $15 billion to revamp the New York City subway system and the bus system, where 90% of that money was supposed to go to? So I thought that was interesting. Germany had elections this week, and they did not elect the far-right ACF party that was promoted by Vice President Vance, and by Elon Musk. That was the far-right party that wanted to establish relations with Russia and no longer talk about the Holocaust. But they did elect a middle to the right conservative party, which I do agree with. And the new chancellor said that they're going to go with Europe and start making trade deals with each other to the exclusion of the United States, because the United States is not a reliable trade partner, is not a reliable NATO partner, and that they're going to carve a path independent from America, and that there's been too much uh, reestablishing relations with Russia that is not comfortable for Germany and Europe. So that was a bad bet that Elon Musk and Vance injected themselves in. And it's almost they were trying to influence an election in Germany the same way that we criticized others that interfere with our elections. Um, uh, the government is cutting and terminating a $2.4 billion contract that it has with Verizon and now giving it to Musk's company Starlink. That's what we were concerned about with all these departments that Musk is gaining access to, the contract and their terms and the different information regarding the employees in these departments. He's using that information to benefit himself. And so Trump, who seems to still have no daylight between himself and Elon Musk, has awarded a $2.4 billion contract, canceled it with Verizon, and gave it to Starlink. We're starting to see these town hall meetings where people who are Republicans, who voted for their Republican congressman, not happy with what they're seeing being done on the federal level with these employees and some of these programs being cut. Remember, the University of Alabama has one of the largest research departments, and most of their grants come from the federal government, and those are Trump voters. There's a lot of Iowa subsidies to farmers that are being cut, and those are Trump voters. So it's not just Democrats that are upset about this. We saw that Bezos, and there's been this race to the right by Bezos, by Zuckerman, by Tim Cook at Apple to curry good favor with President Trump. Well, now Bezos, who owns the Washington Post, he says that the opinion pieces and everybody would universally agree that the opinion writing in the Washington Post is some of the best opinion writing out there, even more so than the Journal and the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times. He said that they're going to now focus their opinions on the free market and personal liberties without opposing views. And a lot of their really good editors who give these opinion pieces have walked out. They are telling you that in order to get your Medicare, they have to cut food research, and that's not true. They're doing this so they could pass tax cuts for the billionaires and keep them in place, the tax cuts that have been in effect since 2017. Again, if you cut the entire federal budget and all these federal employees in the military and do the 8% cuts per year, it's only going to save about 3% of the overall budgets, where most of the money goes to pay the interest on the $36 trillion debt, as well as Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. Musk is now trying to shape the race in the United States and in Wisconsin for the Supreme Court. He's walking around now wearing black sunglasses, a black hat, and a black shirt, like he's Dr. Death. He wants to flip that Supreme Court, which now is a more Democratic-leaning court, focusing on issues that are near and dear to Democrats, pro-choice, different kind of programs that fund Medicaid on the state level, as well as school programs. The richest man in the world can really wreak havoc if he gets involved in politics, not only in our country and other countries. So that's something that we have to see. They wanted to have workers not only tell the Doge program why their job should be kept, why they are a good employee. Workers were supposed to write that, and there's been some conflicting court opinions on should they or shouldn't they. And Trump basically says, well, if you don't, you're probably going to be partially fired or fired. And also that workers have to give a weekly update on all the things that they've done that week. Well, the problem is a lot of these workers are classified workers, so they can't, the FBI, CIA workers can't talk about um, what they're doing on a weekly basis. You know, the it's almost demeaning that Musk is making these employees send this kind of information. This is what their bosses should be doing. This is how department heads run their departments. This is how the federal labor force is judged and reviewed. It's not done by a man named Elon Musk. Mike, our own national security advisor, Mike Walls, dodged the question of whether Vladimir Putin is a dictator. Are you kidding me? We can't even answer that question. It's okay to say that Vladimir Putin is a dictator, and yes, we still have to deal with him. Yes, we still have to deal with President Xi of China. Yes, we still have to deal with Kim Jong Un of North Korea. It's okay to call him a dictator because that is what he is. Getting rid of uh, qualified and hard workers is going to be an incredible brain drain. These are not, again, razor scalpel cuts. These are cuts being done with a machete. And we're losing the best and the brightest. You don't cut first and then ask questions later. I think that Musk is hopelessly uninformed, and he really doesn't care. I mean, he's a billionaire. He doesn't care about these people, how they're going to suffer. Um, I get it that they want to have cuts, but there's a lot of young scientists who are going to become disillusioned that they're not going to have a place to go and get a job after they graduate from college. People who are working on cures of cancer, cures for Parkinson, cures for Alzheimer's diseases. There are 234 TSA employees were cut this week. Really? That's, that's going to affect us traveling. It's going to lengthen the time that we have to get through an airport. Getting there an hour and a half early, we may have to get there 2.5 hours earlier. They're making it out. This is what I really have a problem with, that all government employees are evil and crooked. I just think that, having chaos is not the way to root out corruption or government waste or fraud and abuse. The Pentagon was going to fire mass firings of employees and Department of Defense, and a judge said that would violate our laws. It's emboldening our enemies. It's sending mixed signals that we don't know really what we're doing. There was the Friday Night Massacre firing where Trump fired CQ Brown, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who was African American, fired the Rear Admiral of the Navy, who was a female, as well as the head of the Air Force. That's some scary stuff. That's just really Pete Hegseth talking about in his book of 2024, where he said that this is woke gone run amok. Everybody universally said that these generals and admirals were doing a good job. Dan Bongino was now appointed as the director of the FBI under Kash Patel, who was approved earlier this week. Bongino is another Fox News commentator. He also has a very popular podcast. This is the first time that the director of the deputy of the FBI is not going to be a career FBI official. That is really something that was supposed to be done. It's historically required, and they're going to have to get an exception. And so now we have Kash Patel, who wasn't in law enforcement, was a former public defender. And now we have Dan Bongino, who has a law enforcement background, but was not in the FBI. So Patel had said that he was going to pick a career person to be his deputy. It did not happen. They also fired the head of the JAG Corps in the military, which is a problem. The JAG is the Judge Advocate General Corps, which is the lawyers of the military. They're supposed to keep the law and order in the military, make sure that military orders and military rules are followed. They administer the military code of justice, including defending and prosecuting U.S. service members in military court. They're known as the conscience of the military and a moral guide to what's right and wrong. And the move makes it appear that the administration wants more compliant people in these positions. Pete Hegseth says, I'm firing everybody at the top because I want more warriors than people who are administrators. Um, Firing 5% to 8% of the civilian workforce um, in the Pentagon is another 7,600 workers that are going to lose their job. Canada won the hockey match last Thursday night. It was really fun to watch. I think it's been eye opening for not only hockey, but basketball, baseball, and football to see that if they're going to continue with these all-star games, they're going to have the athletes be competitive. It really was fun to watch. I think it was in good spirit, the Canadians versus the Americans. And after they won, Trudeau said, you can't take our country, President Trump, and you can't take our game, which is hockey. The USA cut money to kids in Ethiopia who have AIDS. So the USA department sends aid to Ethiopia so the kids don't have AIDS. They rely on this medicine to stay alive, and it only costs $1,000 per year per patient. I think that's a worthy thing that shouldn't have been cut. I think you all heard about that somebody in Texas died of measles. That is something that we've had total control over. As expected, Robert Kennedy, head of HHS, has stopped the flu program, advertising and promoting for people to get the flu vaccine for this season. And I know I had the flu last week, and my partner Ronnie's had it this week, and it just knocked him out for 4 days. The flu is pretty devastating. But more importantly, the measles vaccine is not being pushed now by HHS. Before, we had pockets of measles popping up, and this was in Texas, and somebody died. They popped up because there was an it was because vaccines aren't being taken, and therefore were now subjected to possibly being exposed to measles. Kennedy's old group that was the anti-vaxxers said the reason that they're getting measles is that the measles vaccine isn't as strong as it was before. There's no research, no evidence of that. The evidence is that the measles are popping up where there's a high number of unvaccinated people. Used to be that we would get between 5 and 15 cases of measles per year. Turns out that now we're up to almost 40 measles cases. AI is going to now fit into the fate of federal workers who respond to Elon Musk, that they justify their retention as employees. Can you imagine how FBI and CIA employees are going to have to justify their jobs, and that some computer with AI is going to determine whether they keep their job? The Supreme Court temporarily ruled that the Office of Special Counsel is a 5-year position, can't be fired by President Trump. It says we're going to remand it back to the lower court for them to make a decision. Trump was sued by the AP over their failure to call the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America. And essentially what Trump said is, if you're not going to say nice things about me, then I'm not going to say nice things about you and let you into the press pool. Everybody needs to understand that the government used to advertise itself as being, this is the go-to place. If you're a veteran or you're a military spouse, you should come work for us, work for the government, not the private sector. Now, where are these people who are going to go get jobs after they're cut? I just don't know. I think that people, even the MAGA supporters, understand the difference between a sledgehammer and a scalpel. And I think it's fun to talk about taking a sledgehammer to the government, but I think there's a number of Republicans now that are speaking up, even silently, amongst themselves in the Congress. There's certainly some cabinet officials that said that we really prefer that we take a scalpel to this and not a sledgehammer. You know, people don't want to see all this firing. It's just not good for the economic health of this country. FAA employees were fired and said that after they were fired, without our skills, the pilots are going to be flying blindly in the sky. I mean, that is a strong statement. Um, New York Post even said that Trump is acting like a dictator, and that is a Murdoch magazine that's for him. Uh, Trump has now acknowledged, even though that he put out a video called Trump Gaza, uh, that it doesn't look like that it's going to be able to be the new Riviera of the Middle East because Egypt and Jordan are not buying into it. The Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers had a press conference on Friday, February 21st, and said they demand that they be given pardons, not commutations, and that they now will be suing the Justice Department for being wrongfully charged and wrongfully convicted. So this is what Trump has unleashed by partnering with these people, the Blood Oath people, Proud Boys, and the Oath Keepers, that they are now going to sue the government, and we're going to have to either pay money to settle their cases or win all these cases in court. The head of the Proud Boys, incidentally, was arrested in Washington, D.C. on the day that they announced it because he assaulted a counter protester and a police officer. This doesn't sound like law and order, folks. Also, Doge is just a drop in the bucket. There are, when we talk about Doge, it's 100 potential employees that are employed by the government that are going through these departments without any experience on what these departments do. Again, there's a lack of transparency. We don't know anything about these workers who are trying to decide the future of these departments and the future of these employees. McConnell, Andy Beshear, who's the governor of Kentucky, and Rand Paul, the other senator with Mitch McConnell, they're very concerned about the implementation of tariffs against Canada because bourbon is one of the biggest producers of revenue for the state of Kentucky, and they export all their bourbon, not only throughout the United States and the world, but to Canada consumes a tremendous amount of bourbon, and they're worried that if there's going to be reciprocal tariffs, that the bourbon industry is going to suffer. The Mendez brothers were denied a new trial, so this limits their path of getting out of prison. The new district attorney for LA denied this, so that's a shocker. Hamas finally returned Sherry Bass's body. Last week they returned a body that wasn't hers. Phase 1 is over now. I don't think we're ever going to get to phase 2 because of the distrust between Israel and Hamas. And Israel has every right to not to trust Hamas because of the propaganda and the way they're returning these prisoners. It's they're starved to death. They're being humiliated. They have to make these speeches that they were treated great. You could tell that they're the shadow of their former self. Karen Bass, the mayor of LA, fired the fire chief. She said she should have called up 1,000 fire replacement workers that she didn't do, and that this fire chief isn't cooperating with the investigation. Not a big fan of Karen Bass. Kind of feel like that the fire chief's taking the fall when it should be the mayor who's taken that fall. Again, we talked about the unvaccinated people. Gene Hackman, he died yesterday. He was found with his wife of 64 years old. He was 95. He and one of his dogs and the wife were dead. First, they thought it was maybe carbon monoxide poisoning, but now it may look like there was some foul play involved. Gene Hackman was just a tremendous, tremendous actor. He's been in everything from The Hunt of Red October to Serpico, Birdcage. He's got a great comedy career. He's won 2 Oscars, Golden Globes. I mean, Popeye Doyle. He's just an amazingly wide berth of acting. I liked him so much. Kind of funny. Stephen A. Smith, who is a loudmouth on ESPN, is talking about running for president in 2028. How dumb do we have to go down to elect a president of the United States. I mean, can we start electing people that are serious, that have the chops and the education and the experience, governmental experience and political experience to run that office? Um, LeBron and Luca are just incredible. I think that the LA Lakers have a real shot of surprising everybody. You're starting to see the way LeBron and Luca are playing with each other. What LeBron's doing at 40 years old is just amazing. I'm a big Luka Doncic fan, and I think Matthew, uh, the quarterback for the Rams, I forget his last name, Stafford. I think he's going to get re-signed by either the Rams or the Raiders, which is going to cause a domino effect of quarterbacks. I think that at that point, then we have Sam Darnold, who isn't going to be re-signed by the Minnesota Vikings because I think they're going to go with Daniel Jones first and then bring in J.J. McCarthy. Aaron Rodgers is not signed by the Jets, so I think he's going to be somebody, but I don't think he's going to go work under Sean McVay because it's a totally different system. But we're going to have a quarterback carousel that's going to start, I think, within 2 weeks. So that is all of the substantive issues I want to talk about. I have some questions from listeners. Somebody asked True Crime Connoisseur, what about the Menendez brothers? I talked about that. I think it's unfair. I definitely think that they have done enough time for their crime. I definitely think that they were abused as children, and that was a mitigating factor. Liz asks, how soon will JP Miller be in jail? I don't know, but not soon enough. This week we had Randy Hood, who is a tremendous lawyer at McGowan Hood, and Mark Tinsley joined forces to sue JP Miller. So I really wouldn't want those two lawyers chasing me. What's the latest on Buster Murdaugh? R. Jones asked. Well, he won a tremendous victory this week where Judge Gergel said that 4 of the defamation cases where Netflix and some of these other production companies inferred that he had something to do with Stephen Smith's death can sue in Hampton County, his home county, where presumably, there's still a lot of people that support the Murdaughs. Some of the other defendants like Warner Brothers and Blackfin, they're going to be sued in federal court in Charleston, where you draw from a larger group of people. So there's going to be multiple discovery being done. I think the federal court case is going to get heard before the state court case, but it's going to be interesting to see. Mary says a big worry for her right now is that the White House press conference announced they will determine which media they will accept questions from. I totally agree. I think it's scary because Trump has sued a lot of media businesses and is going to get settlements. He's going to get something from CBS, 60 Minutes, even though that they routinely edit everybody's interview. He's going to get a payment because they edited Kamala Harris's interview that was done before the election. Mark Zuckerberg already paid $25 million, and I think there's going to be some other. I know ABC News paid $15 million to Trump, so he's going to get a bonanza of settlements. And now, again, if you don't say nice things about him, he's not going to answer any of your questions or let you in the press. Amber said, I know this is an old case, but I listened to the 911 call made by Maggie and Paul about Gloria. I heard a lot of talking in the background. Has this been investigated? She said also in one of the Stephen Smith interviews, somebody mentions Timmy, which was the nickname that Paul had for his alter ego when he got drunk, or his friends had for him. Yes, we have investigated the 911 tape, and we can't determine whether anybody other than Paul and Maggie were there. We do know that there was a worker that did come up and see Gloria at the bottom of the stairs. As far as the Stephen Smith interviews, we just don't have any knowledge of who was involved in Stephen's death, and I have no knowledge that any of the Murdaughs were involved in his death. True Crime Connoisseur says, what about the thoughts on the $5 million visas that Trump proposed? I already talked about that. I said it could have some validity, but there needs to be carve out for people that also can lend to our economy, either by intellectual or by hard work. I don't want a country of rich people. That doesn't necessarily mean just because you have a lot of money that you're smart and you should come into our country. Um, I know Trump has marketed the idea that they will come in and spend their money and boost the economy. I think it affect the real estate market because the housing prices could go up and it could, um, it could come in. They could come in and start buying up our businesses, our hotels. I totally agree. It's could let Russian oligarchs in. $5 million to some people is a drop in the bucket for some of these billionaires. So that's it. Debbie Ann Demeter said that her son was also threatened with ICE at high school, and he's a senior in high school. It's horrible, Debbie. The school did punish the kids involved for harassment, intimidation, and bullying. I think you should be worried. I think it's a disgrace, and I feel for you. I feel for your child. Linda Limerick says the economy is going to be affected by all of these unemployed federal workers and workers that are getting fired. I totally agree. My good friend Casey Odell, she said that Gene Hackman death is weird. I totally agree on that. Although he hadn't been seen in the public, I think, for like 10 years. That's a strange thing. He stopped acting, I think, in 2003. And Morgan Sanders says hello. Hello, Morgan. So thanks for listening, and we'll talk next week. Have a good weekend. EB out.